I'm Adam York, the CEO, and we have Janelle Davis, who's our Client Solutions Manager. So today, why are we here? We're here because of the conversations that we've had over 2021. It's been a really interesting year for everyone, right? And we've had a number of conversations, and we've been really, really intentional on trying to understand what's going on inside of our client base and inside of other credit unions in general in the area of equipment and facilities. And as we look from 2021 to 2022, it's kind of an uncertain time. And a good example of that was a conversation I had with a director this morning who was talking about how 2021, they saw a lot of growth. Some of it was really unexpected and came really quickly, but just really a different kind of a year. So when it came time to planning for 2022, they just were in a little bit of a quandary. Is this going to be another year of growth and be able to reach the community in a deeper way? Or is this going to be kind of a pullback year? So there's a decent amount of uncertainty. So what we thought we would do is share what we have learned, basically looking at our clients and also being plugged into the industry in this area of equipment and facilities. And these are the 5 topics that we're going to focus on for the presentation. We just simply have to start with staffing shortages because this is impacting absolutely everyone. It's certainly been the biggest concern that we've heard and we've seen publication on that. As we try to figure out, what is really going on, what are some of the larger trends? So much of this has to do with the overall reduction in labor force that's even available. There's approximately 3 million less people in the labor force from February of 2020 until August of 2021. And that's had a really, really big impact on everyone, in particular in financial institutions. And one of the major drivers of that has been just a really big increase in retirements. And so we see a lot more people leaving the workforce, and that has clearly had an impact on available workers. What that means, though, for us is that we have really something bigger than just a staffing shortage. A staffing shortage that is really more about something else going on. We have, in the process of people retiring, we have a certain amount of knowledge that's going out the door. And so that means that there's more kind of expected of those team members that are there. And also the new team members that come in are coming with a different set of expectations. And I think I want to just stop on that point for a little bit, because I think many of us in the credit union movement kind of feel this sense of a need to deliver a mission that's meaningful to the team. And so an example of new expectations for people that are coming in has to do with this sense of wanting to be part of something bigger, wanting to have meaningful work that actually contributes to the outcome of the credit union. And so understanding that that is the expectation that's coming in is really, really important as we try to figure out how to create a team that is more stable and long lasting. And we definitely see a different set of expectations. We also understand that the change of team is going to be here for a while. And part of that just has to do with a cultural shift and a generational shift. We see people staying in roles for just a shorter period of time. And part of that is a different mindset about work. What does healthy work look like? Often there's an expectation that people can get growth or that they're going to have a sense of meaning. And as soon as they feel like that may not be the case, they're onto something new. So as people that are running an organization, especially in this area of equipment and facilities, we just have to know that that's going to be the case. So that is probably a long-term trend, that being in this mode of having to get team members, get them up to speed, have your knowledge transfer, make sure that you're meeting expectations and setting expectations, and understanding that people are going to continue to be there and then maybe grow on to another job somewhere else. And so all of that really points to the last part of this, which is to really focus on how much you can automate. And automation is really kind of a broad term that I'm using to talk about your equipment and technology strategy. Really what we're seeing is, because of this change, we need to ask equipment to do a lot more. We need to ask technology to do a lot more, to pick up the slack, to take on more work that might have been done by people. So if, in fact, equipment strategy is now an organizational strategy, and I think that that is the case as we consider that equipment really is part of your team, it needs to be more visible. It needs to be more visible to the whole organization. What is the overall strategy? How does equipment now become part of the team? And we've actually seen this in a lot of different ways. We've seen this in the way that branches are designed. We've seen this in the way that technology is selected. We've even seen it in the way that equipment is treated. I can think of a credit union that has actually named their telecash recyclers because they viewed them as being contributors to the overall mission of the credit union. So with all of that going on, how much visibility is there to the way that your equipment is contributing to the mission of the credit union, and how many people are involved? And I just wanted to kind of give you this picture to show you the whole universe of things that we call equipment. It's really a broad term because it involves things like pieces of actual hardware to more kind of facilities related or building related things. These are really all the things that impact your team's ability to deliver to your members. And so there are, in any given branch, there's just a really wide variety of things that can be part of the organization strategy to support members. We're going to just hone in a little bit on what kind of impact your equipment management approach can have on your team by just doing a quick poll. And Janelle is going to run that.
Yep. The majority are 1 to 5 that have, we've got about 11 on that. And then the other 3 categories, excuse me, are 6 to 10, 11 to 20, and 20 plus. Those each got 2. So those are who typically you think are the number of people who are placing service requests for your equipment.
Yeah, so what we can see from that is that a lot can fall on just a small group of people. And we really do see a variety of ways that this is handled. Some credit unions really do want all sorts of people empowered and getting help when equipment is down. And then many of them do kind of concentrate that. And what that can mean is that your knowledge base is really concentrated in a few people, and that they end up having a lot to handle across a lot of different verticals. So that's interesting to see that. Thank you for participating in that poll. And so that leads to kind of our next point, which is that when equipment needs attention or when there's an issue with facilities, internal communication can be a challenge. And what that often can look like is a variety of different methods or an unknown approach or what to do. So sometimes when you're facing an equipment issue, it's something really basic, like you just need to know what switch to throw or what to plug in. Sometimes it's a training issue. Sometimes it's much, much bigger, and maybe a component needs to be replaced or the entire unit needs to be replaced. And so what can start out really small can turn into a much bigger thing. And all of that equates to an interruption to the ability to service members. And it can really be costly not knowing what to do or what next step to take. And also bottlenecks can really be an issue too. If all the information just goes to a few people and they're not able to handle all of it. And then what happens when you do need to bring somebody in from the outside? There's a lot of things. So one of the trends that we've seen, and this has been kind of a really big thing in 2021, is with the changing service provider situation. There's been a lot of private equity acquisitions. There's been a lot of acquisitions in general. So the company name that your team may have seen before may be a different company name. And so how do you deal with the fact that I don't know when a technician is going to show up? I don't know what company they work for. I don't know who the person is that's it's going to be showing up.
And I actually have a customer story that I just wanted to share with everybody that relates to this specifically. So they had somebody at their branch who was a floater, and a technician showed up to work on their ITM, which is a critical piece of equipment, but they didn't know if it was real or not. There's security issues. You don't know if those are the right people you want opening your machine and working on your machine. But with our web app, our program admin was able to sign in and see that there was an open service request for that specific piece of equipment, and for the same reason that the tech said that they were there to fix it. So they felt good and confident that they were okay to let them have access to that piece of equipment.
Yeah, so we definitely see security as being a bigger thing, communication around service events being a bigger deal. Next kind of trend that we've seen that people are trying to address is how to deal with their current methods. And one of the things we talked about earlier is like there's a different expectation with the team now. And some of that expectation comes down to the use of technology. They kind of expect that their employer is going to have technology, automation that will support some manual tasks. But we haven't always seen that those methods have kept up. Often people are doing their very best efforts to put together some kind of a system to deal with keeping track of their equipment inventory, or facilities issues might be in a shared Excel spreadsheet. Many things are done by email and managed in an inbox as far as like, hey, these are the events that have come in. This is who's handling them, especially facilities things, but equipment things in general. And then obviously a lot on smartphones.
We have another poll here. Please go ahead and take a moment just to answer the question here, which is how do you manage your equipment data? It looks like the majority, 64%, are Excel. And that's interesting because I also have a customer story where to manage all of her equipment and service needs, she has a shared Excel spreadsheet that she shares with all of her branch staff. So anytime that there's an issue, whether it's related to facilities or equipment, they have to go in and put their notes in there. And then she actually manages it and color codes it on the status of where it's at, if it's been taken care of, if it's pending. So we recently did a demo with her of our web app, and she was really excited for the opportunity to have everything be online and having to not needed to manage everything through that spreadsheet any longer.
Yeah, Excel is certainly a really common way, but it sounds like all of those methods are not that unusual. And then the next thing we really want to focus on, the challenge for 2022, is if equipment is really going to be a part of the team and your facilities are part of your strategy, then we need to make sure that it's functioning optimally. So part of this really comes down to the right equipment for the job. And I mean that pretty broadly. I don't just mean that at the purchase of equipment, but also, is there equipment that needs to be upgraded? Could it perform better if it was maybe had some of the more recent upgrades? And so really making sure that the organization is thinking holistically about equipment being on the team and being part of the job across all areas of the credit union's function. And then obviously keeping it running optimally, which can go to making sure that the team is really trained on it, that's part of the onboarding process, is to be trained on the equipment, on their teammates, the equipment members, and things like preventive maintenance. And then really trying to remove the time killers, everything around the management. Equipment is amazing. Facilities are amazing when everything is running well, right? You just don't even think about it. Work just flows. When it doesn't, or when there's an issue, or when you need to make a change, then it can become a real struggle and can really be a time killer. And then I think probably the fourth one is just most important, which is to make sure that there's visibility. This seems that the issues around equipment and facilities seem to really be kind of like a subtle, under the radar thing that can suck away time, motivation, energy, by being just kind of a chronic thing that happens in the background. And it can be an annoyance, but added all together can actually become a real problem. And just to kind of like illustrate this example, we're going to look at ATMs in particular. ATMs are just really one part of the strategy, but going with upgraded equipment means two things. First off, it means that your equipment can do a lot more work. Interactive teller machines, as an example, are doing so much more. They are taking on a lot more of the work of serving the members than just a basic cash dispenser. However, they're also needing a lot more attention. They're asking a lot more from you. So instead of having 5 to 10-ish service events a year, they're needing much more. They're generally having 15 to 25 events a year, and they're needing more from you in terms of compliance, software management, etc. That trade-off is really worth it because of the value that they can provide. It just means that having a strategy around making sure that your equipment is optimal is really important. And that goes, we're looking at ATMs, but really that goes kind of across all of the various kinds of equipment, especially as they're upgraded and you ask them to do more. So we have a lot of conversations with people about interactive teller machines. People are often kind of in three phases of considering whether they're going to, either they've decided not to use them, or they're considering it, or they're already doing it. It'd be interesting to know just on this call where you are in that journey as a credit union. You can share those results.
The number one is evaluating. Number two is not in strategy, and the already deployed. We only had one person who answered that one. So that's interesting. That's kind of thing that we're seeing across our customer base as well.
Yeah, that's really true. We have a ton of people evaluating it for everything that we've talked about. I'll tell you that like there are a ton of pluses for it, but it is a really intentional decision, it has to be kind of thought out in your overall strategy. So it's great that a number of you are evaluating it. And it's also fine if it's not in your strategy, that means you've decided some other way to support your members. And that kind of comes down to your overall credit union strategy. It makes a lot of sense. One thing that we think about when we think about facilities and equipment is how those issues are addressed. And what we've seen is that a good portion of events can be handled internally, and then some portion is handled externally. And this varies dramatically by credit unions. Some credit unions are very much do-it-yourself minded, or they've even hired staff that are the first line of resolution for facilities and equipment issues. So the 37% is really kind of an average number, but in some credit unions, it could be a very low percentage, and then in other credit unions, a very high percentage. So that's a good thing to be aware of, and figure out if that is a choice that you've made. Do you want to handle half of your events internally? Have you staffed for that? Do you have a system for that? Or would you really prefer to have most things handled externally? If you're handling things externally, the average cost for a technician is anywhere from $95 an hour for copiers and printers to 150 hours plus for ATMs, and obviously the cost of parts, fuel, etc. And clearly there could be contract costs involved with that too. So there's pluses and minuses to both strategies, but making sure that you're thinking about internal support too, and what is your approach for that, and how is that divided, and does that make the most sense? As you change up your equipment strategy, you'll always want to look at that support strategy too. So the last part of this is really, really important, which is those relationships with the service providers doing the work. And we see a couple of things being really, really important to support that well. Part of it is knowing what's going on in the moment. So if you don't have visibility into what's happening, you may not know about the impact of a poorly run service event until a week or 2 or 3 later. You may not know how much your members are being impacted. So making sure you have really clear visibility in the organization of what's going on with service events, but also other events like cleanings or upgrades, and what's happening across the organization. And then the second one, service history, really goes to context. What has the overall performance of your equipment been compared to what it should be? You do this with your employees. You look at like performance metrics and things like that. How about your equipment? Is it contributing to your overall success? And then and having that conversation with your provider and being able to have data to have that conversation. And then certainly communication. This is probably the single biggest thing that we see with providers, is making sure that they're able to communicate with you quickly and easily, that you're able to set expectations for them, and that's really clear. And then the fourth one is probably the first one that everyone thinks about, which is how quickly are they responding? How quickly is the equipment getting up and running? And I think a lot of attention can be given to ATMs because there's lots of uptime statistics. The rest of the equipment, from drive up to security cameras and everything in between, can also have an impact. And speed of response goes to your external providers, but how about internally? How quickly are you able to get to things internally? And we talked to a credit union recently that has been growing a lot, and they have a facilities manager who is the first line of response. And as they've grown, he's still one guy. You know, it's hard for him to get everywhere. And so they've been thinking about adjusting their strategy on how much he should really be the first responder on versus maybe adding to that team or handling it in a different way. So as you grow and as your organization changes, you really want to pay attention to, is the speed of response still where you want it to be, and make sure you're managing that. So let you know some of the times that we generally see remotely monitored equipment can be addressed really quickly. That's a pretty limited scenario. That's much more like ATMs. Copiers can sometimes also be remotely monitored. If an internal resource is addressing the issue, that is usually a faster repair, at least for the first line of response. And then for the outside service providers, it can vary dramatically by type of equipment. Typically an ATM, you want closer to 2 to 4 hour range, but many of the other segments take longer than that, next day. So those are what we generally see when it comes to like setting expectations with those service providers. It's a little different, internal versus external. So that really goes to the major trends that we've seen, the things that we think are going to be important to pay attention to in 2022. And so I will just give you a couple of words about Equips and what we do, and then we can take questions. One What we do is we automate equipment management. And part of what we're trying to do is remove the unknown. An example of the unknown is if a piece of equipment has an issue, I don't know who to go to. I don't know where to get help. Well, you just go to Equips. Or I don't know, is this going to be a short event or a long event? Are a lot of people going to need to be involved or just a few people? Equips automates that entire process. Or I don't know, has this equipment reached its end of life? Should it be replaced? We help supply the expertise for that. Or if it is going to be replaced, what are the options available? We help connect to options that allow you to get upgraded equipment and to replace equipment. So our entire focus is delivering software that automates that process. And it really can happen across all areas of operations. It can impact a lot of people, putting all things through one place. One place, one process is kind of the way that we think about that. And that's how we deliver it. I showed this list already, but these are just some examples of the kinds of things we see customers using our software in many, many ways, putting a lot of things into Equips to manage. But this is just one example of what that can look like. We would be happy to set up a demo with anyone at any point if you would like that. But we're also really happy to make ourselves available since we're really exposed to the area of equipment trends, things that are going on. So if you have any questions about that or about anything you saw, we'd be happy to take those.
Sorry, there's one question that came up. Said which branch positions usually use the Equips web app?
Yeah, that can vary somewhat, but typically it is someone actually in the physical location because it gets a lot of benefit if you have someone that's on the site there that can see exactly what's going on. So that can be a branch manager, a head teller, sometimes just members of the branch staff. That would be our typical user. That doesn't mean that that's the person that determines where that request goes. It can go to someone internal. So if the approach is, hey, for grounds issues, that goes to our internal team, that can be routed internally. And if the internal team can't resolve it, they can send it out to the Equips network or to the assigned provider that the credit union works with.
Another one is, can you order consumables through Equips?
Yes, you absolutely can, and all sorts of people do. An example of a consumable would be toners related to copiers and printers, but there's all sorts of things that are consumed regularly inside the branch, and those can be kind of ordered and managed in the same way, either using the Equips network or using providers of your choice. That same concept of that one place, one process applies to consumables too.
Is there a limit to how many people can use the web app?
No, I think it works best when as many people as possible have access, and then part of how you control that is where those requests go once they're entered. So letting as many people have access as possible means that they can turn around and make face-to-face contact with that member really quickly and have the process automated in the background. So our goal is to really automate as much as possible in the background and keep the team in the branch focused on members. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciate everyone being here. It's been nice to spend this afternoon with you. If you have any questions, you can certainly send those to us later. And we appreciate your time very much.